Hello, my name is Beck and welcome to a spoiler-free review for Rhythm of War by Brandon Sanderson. This is the fourth book in his Stormlight series. I have reviews for his other stuff, so if you haven't read up to this point, maybe you'll be spoiled for the previous books in this series. Rest assured there will be no spoilers for Rhythm of War in this review, but I will have a separate spoiler vlog going up shortly. So depending on when you're watching this, it will either be coming or live, so I'll link it in the description when it's available. But let's get into discussing this in a spoiler-free manner. So firstly, what is this about? To kind of sum it up, because this is a very long-winded story and it has a lot of development so far, but Dalinar has kind of formed the coalition now of the different factions as a political stance against the war, but the war is also having some technological discoveries made about it as well that is linked to the magic system, and this is actually quite heavy, so I'm just gonna put her down. There is also a quest into Shadesmar, which is evidenced by the US cover because it has Shallan and Adolin in Shadesmar on that cover, and then naturally there is also a progression of the Radiance and character growth and world building, which naturally comes along with each of Brandon's installments. Now I somehow have to review this book, so let's talk about world building, characters, themes, pace, and then overall thoughts at the very end. So when it comes to world building, the magic system just grew alongside technology in this installment, which honestly I just found incredible. Like, we already understand the aspects of this world. It already felt tangible to me, but Brandon somehow like peeled back the shell and let us delve even deeper into the lore of this world. And I love how he did that through different character perspectives, and I love that he experimented with things in the world as well. So he applied logic and science to magic systems that he'd already created, which was just wonderful because we got to interrogate his magic system and understand it as the characters would. There was also some delightful Easter egg moments when it came to the Cosmere, because if you haven't read Warbreaker before reading this book or this series in general, I would recommend doing that. If you haven't read it, then there's not going to be anything that's spoilery for you and you will still understand the story as a concept and a whole, but it's nice to kind of understand these little moments that happen because I had that understanding, so I was in the know, and so when certain scenes happened involving particular Cosmere aspects, I got very excited. So it just kicks up that connection to the story, and I loved having that understanding, and it was just so exciting to see some Cosmere stuff appearing as well. But now, if you don't know, the Cosmere is Brandon Sanderson's universe, and so some of his world building tends to collide and some of his characters are recurring throughout his different books, but it's all set in the same universe but on different planets. So if you weren't aware of the Cosmere, now you kind of are. Now let's talk characterization, and I want to say that this felt so expansive, this book, because I've already said that about the world building, but when it comes to the characterization, we get some new perspectives that we haven't read from before, and I really loved seeing that new nuance to the story, while we still do see from the characters we know and love, which is something that I adored as well. I enjoyed having those different aspects to kind of flesh stuff out and delve into new perspectives, and I really appreciated the way that it made the world feel even deeper and more full. And that said, I obviously adored the characters that we know and love. If you weren't aware, Kaladin is my favourite character, so I adored reading more from his perspective in this book, and I also really loved seeing Adolin because I really have a soft spot for him. I kind of love Adolin as well. I really want to shout about the things that I loved and the character beats that I loved in this book, but I talk about all of that in my spoiler vlog, and this is a spoiler-free review, so I need to just like rein myself in because I want to sing my praises for this book and I can't, so I'm being vague and I apologize. Just know that there is a continued depth to the characters that we've already seen grow and develop so much. I thought that some of their growth was potentially capped at a certain point, but that is definitely not the case. Like I said before, Brandon like digs in and peels back his characters so you can delve into the depths of them, and he does that in such an intricate way that was very in line with how characters would react. And so all of this exploring that he did definitely felt in character for every single character that he explored, and honestly that is just an art. And something else that just ties neatly into character is mental health. I know a lot of the Radiants are broken, which is a pretty succinct way in summing up the fact that mental health plays a role significantly in these books, but I love that the brokenness of the Radiants, particularly Kaladin, was focused on in this book, but in a sense that it became more expansive, like his other aspects of world building and his characterization. Mental health became an absolute focus, and it became a place of acknowledgement and development, and it wasn't just Kaladin that was suffering from depression, it was a whole bunch of different characters in different situations that suffered from different mental health aspects, and I like how that was acknowledged and supported by the other characters. There was particularly a moment with Adolin who supported some mental health stuff, and I loved seeing that, and I loved that conversation. So the way that it has been set up was more subtle and not so much acknowledged in the previous books, even though it was a key part of development. But now it's being discussed presently in the text, it's being talked about and addressed. And I really liked seeing that aspect in Rhythm of War, because it felt, like I said, for the rest of the parts of this book that I loved, it felt a lot deeper, and I really appreciated that. And so the way that Brandon has built character really just tied into the themes of this book, and I don't want to spoil anything obviously, so I'm going to stay vague in this section, but the way that he built themes and he made new scenes, it echoed stuff that he's already built up in the previous books in a similar fashion, but altered so that we anticipate and respect the new kind of steps he's taking with his characters in these situations. It had like double meanings a lot of the time, and it had balanced opposites in the text of characters balancing each other. And I love that aspect because it added more dimension to the story than I thought was previously possible. Like, as soon as I think a Stormlight book has reached its peak, it just develops even further, and I have no idea how he keeps doing that, but he just must have such a deep understanding of his characters and how he wants to develop them in the context of this world and what their goals are and what their personalities are like, that everything, as far as I'm concerned with character, was pretty damn seamless. When it comes to this world, it still feels like to me that there is so much that is undiscovered. Even though we've delved so deeply into the lore of the world, even though we've delved deeply into the science and technology of this world, it feels like I still have so much to learn still. And I feel like Brandon is only showing us the top parts of the iceberg, and he's still working on that whole section underneath. And that whole section underneath potentially also has Cosmere stuff involved, which I'm very excited about. But it feels like this world is so seamlessly developed, and it has so much more to offer and more for us to discover. And then just really quickly a negative, but I don't think that's a negative on the book. I think it's more on me. And I want to talk about pace really quickly, because I found the book sometimes dragged. I don't want to say dragged, but sometimes it felt a little bit slower, but I feel like that's natural when it comes to a book. You're going to have ups and downs depending on what's going on, but sometimes characters that I'd be interested in I might not necessarily be invested in. So even though I was interested in everything that happened in this book, I was more invested in particular characters over someone else. So sometimes in flashback situations or sometimes in particular chapters, I was a little less engaged than obviously reading about like Kaladin, for example, who is my favorite. So that's kind of just on me rather than on the actual text itself, that I felt a little bit like, okay, we're reading from this character now, instead of like, oh, we're reading about Kaladin now. You know, that kind of balance that is struck in a text. So that's more, like I said, a commentary on me and my enjoyment rather than the way that the book was written, if that makes sense. And then at times I was a little bit frustrated by Shallan, but I feel like she's still grown since Oathbringer, and her immaturity has kind of phased out to a sense. And while I was a little bit frustrated by some miscommunication in the book on her part, it very much fitted her characterization with Bonding a Cryptic and her lying to herself and others. So it fit her character, and it wasn't capitalized on for the majority of this book. It was actually addressed. So I can get frustrated at the beginning, but this book is 1,200 pages long, so it was set up specifically to be developed. So I can only be frustrated with miscommunication up to a point, and I'm very aware of that fact. So overall thoughts, I cried so many times by reading this book, and not necessarily at parts that were sad, just because there were so many moments that were infused with such deep character growth, and anytime there is loyalty and love and determination in a book with characters supporting each other after they've gone through these huge either physical journeys or emotional journeys or both, I just tend to get really emotional at the culmination of things like that. So I cried a lot during this book, but I loved it. I loved the character growth. I loved the world building. I love how expansive this was. And it just seemed to build on what we've already understood. I loved it so much. And if you hadn't already guessed, this was a 5 out of 5 star book for me. This was my most anticipated book for 2020, and I am so happy that I've finished it and I can talk about it now. So please talk to me in the comments. Go and check out my spoiler vlog as well. Tell me your favorite characters. Tell me your favorite moments that happened in this book. I adored this book so much. So thank you so much for watching this video. Come and chat with me down below. I'm not just saying that, I mean it. I would love to talk to you about Stormlight stuff and Cosmere stuff and Rhythm of War stuff. So thank you so much for watching this video. I will chat to you in the comments and I'll see you in my next one. Bye.